Something is falling apart in your life right now, or it already did, and you have been trying to understand why. Because you are doing the work. You are thinking the right thoughts. You are holding the vision. You are practicing everything you were taught, and still, the relationship ended. The money dried up. The project collapsed. The people you counted on disappeared. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a question formed that you have not been able to answer. Why is this happening to me right when I need things to go right? Here is the answer. Robert Collier documented it in 1926. In a chapter of The Secret of the Ages that most people never reach because they stop reading too soon. He called it the period of apparent reversal. And he wrote about it with a precision that will make everything that has been falling apart suddenly make complete sense. What is happening to you right now is not punishment. It is not evidence that you were wrong. It is not the universe ignoring your request. It is the mechanism working exactly as designed. And once you understand the mechanism, the loss, the silence, the collapse will look completely different. Not smaller, different. The way a storm looks different when you understand that it is what comes immediately before the clearing. Some of you have been holding on to something that is leaving. A relationship that no longer fits the person you are becoming. A financial situation that keeps contracting no matter what you do. A version of your life that made sense 6 months ago and makes no sense now. And you have been interpreting all of it as failure. As proof that you are doing something wrong. As evidence that this process, this way of thinking, this way of holding a vision, does not work for you. That specific thought, that it works for everyone else but not for you, is the most common thought that appears at exactly this stage, and Collier documented why. He had seen it too many times not to name it. He had watched hundreds of people arrive at this precise moment, the moment when everything they wanted seemed to be moving further away instead of closer, and abandon the process one step before it delivered. He wrote, "The man who gives up at the moment of apparent reversal does not fail because the process failed. He fails because he does not understand that apparent reversal is not the opposite of progress. It is a stage of progress. The final stage before the turn," that sentence, "the final stage before the turn," is what this video is about. If what you just heard describes exactly what you are living right now, hit the like button. It tells me this content is reaching the people who need it. Now stay. Because what Collier documented about why this happens and what it means is the most useful thing you will hear on this subject. Robert Collier spent years studying the pattern of human achievement, not theory, documented cases, real people, real timelines, real outcomes. And what he found, repeated across hundreds of documented cases, was a pattern so consistent that he stopped calling it coincidence and started calling it law. He wrote, "Before every significant manifestation, before every real turning point in a man's circumstances, there appears first a period in which the opposite seems to be occurring. The before every. Not sometimes before, not occasionally before every." He had watched it happen in the lives of men who built fortunes, in the lives of men who rebuilt after complete collapse, in the lives of people who had held a vision for years and watched it finally arrive. And every single one of them had passed through this period first. The period when what they wanted seemed to be receding, the period when what they had seemed to be dissolving. The period when the silence from the direction of their desire was so complete that continuing felt irrational. Collier called this the law of apparent reversal, and he documented it not as a spiritual concept, but as a mechanical one. Here is the mechanism he described. When a man holds a clear mental image, a completed picture of what he wants, and holds it with the quality Collier called assumption rather than hope, the subconscious mind begins reorganizing his interior landscape to match the image, not his exterior circumstances, his interior landscape first. And here is where most people misunderstand the process. The interior reorganization requires the dissolution of what currently occupies that space. You cannot pour new water into a vessel that is already full. The vessel must first empty. What appears to be loss is almost always preparation. The subconscious mind, having received a clear instruction for a new interior state, begins clearing the old one. And that clearing, from the outside, from the perspective of the man who does not understand the mechanism, looks like things falling apart. Relationships that no longer fit the new interior state end. Financial arrangements that belong to the old pattern dissolve. Situations that were held in place by the old identity begin to collapse. and the man who does not know what is happening interprets every one of these collapses as evidence that the process is failing, when in fact, every collapse is evidence that the process is working. The old is clearing, the new is coming. But between the clearing of the old and the arrival of the new, there is a gap, and Collier documented that gap as the most dangerous period in the entire process of manifestation, not because anything can go wrong, but because it looks like everything is wrong. And most people cannot hold their vision through the appearance of its opposite. Before I go further, there is something in the description that matters right now. What Collier documented about this mechanism goes 7 volumes deep. What I am showing you tonight is one principle from one chapter. The other volumes contain what he called the specific mental postures that determine how long the period of apparent reversal lasts and how complete the turn is when it comes. Some people pass through this period in weeks. Others stay in it for years. The difference is not luck. It is documented. It is specific. And it is in the link below. Free if you are in this period right now. The link in the description is not optional. It is the map for exactly where you are standing. Now here is what Collier documented as the 7 stages of the period of apparent reversal, not levels of punishment, stages of preparation. Stage 1, the test of patience. This is the first thing the process does after a clear mental instruction has been given. It slows everything down. Responses stop coming. Progress that felt steady suddenly feels frozen. Time extends in a way that feels designed to exhaust you, and Collier wrote that this is not random. It is the mechanism asking a specific question. Do you want this because it is a preference, or because it is a genuine direction? Because preferences dissolve under pressure. Genuine directions do not. The period of slowing is how the mechanism determines which one yours is. Collier documented that most people misidentify this stage as the end. They interpret the slowing as confirmation that the direction was wrong, and so they pivot. They change course. They choose a different goal, a different path, a different image to hold. And the mechanism, which was in the final stages of delivering on the original instruction, receives a new instruction and begins again from the beginning. From the outside, this looks like a person who simply cannot make up their mind. From the inside, it feels like genuine recalibration. But Collier was precise about what it actually is. It is the mechanism being interrupted at the moment it was closest to delivery. He wrote, "The man who changes his instruction during the period of patience does not start over. He returns to zero." Because the mechanism does not accumulate progress across different instructions. It accumulates progress toward a single, held instruction. Change the instruction, and the accumulation dissolves. This is why some people seem to try everything and achieve nothing. Not because nothing works. Because they change their instruction every time the mechanism slows down to test the permanence of their direction. Stage 2, the test of clarity. False options appear. Collier documented this with a precision that is almost uncomfortable. He wrote that before every genuine opportunity arrives, a series of false ones appear first. A path that looks right but leads nowhere. A relationship that seems like what you asked for, but carries the energy of what you are leaving. An option that would provide comfort in the short term, but would anchor you to the old pattern permanently. And the mechanism places these false options specifically at the moment, when you are most tempted to accept something less than what you actually want. Because the mechanism is not testing whether you can endure difficulty, it is testing whether you can recognize authenticity when comfort is being offered as a substitute. Stage 3, the test of solitude. People leave, not dramatically always, sometimes quietly. People who were present in your life begin to distance themselves without explanation. The circle contracts, and Collier was precise about why. He wrote, "When a man's interior frequency changes, when the new instruction begins reorganizing his interior landscape, those whose frequency no longer corresponds naturally move toward distance. Not because of conflict, not because of anything wrong, because correspondence is the basis of all genuine connection. And when your correspondence changes, what surrounds you must change with it. The people who leave during the period of apparent reversal are not losses. They are the old pattern releasing its grip, and what fills the space they leave will correspond to the new interior you are in the process of building." Stage 4, the test of loss. This is the stage most people cannot interpret correctly, because in this stage, something you believed was necessary for your happiness is removed. Money, security, status, a relationship, something that had become part of how you defined yourself. And Collier wrote something about this stage that stopped many of his readers completely. He wrote, "The mechanism cannot give you what you are clinging to, because what you are clinging to is the proof that you do not yet trust the mechanism itself. The loss is not cruelty. The loss is the mechanism removing your dependency on what you thought you needed, so that what is actually coming has somewhere to land. You cannot receive what you are not willing to lose the old version of." Stage 5, the test of faith, the silence. Collier called this the most demanding stage of all, not because it is the most painful. Stage 4 is usually more painful, but because in stage 5 there is nothing, no loss to interpret, no false option to decline, no relationship ending to understand, just silence. Weeks of it sometimes. No signs, no synchronicities, no sense that anything is responding to anything. And Collier wrote, "In the silence, the mechanism is doing its deepest work. What cannot be built while the man is watching is being built now. The moment you stop monitoring the silence and simply continue is the moment the silence is almost over. Not because your attention makes it end, because the man who can sustain his direction through absolute silence has demonstrated something the mechanism requires before it can deliver. He has demonstrated that the vision is not dependent on external confirmation, that it exists completely independent of whether anything in the physical world is confirming it, and only that kind of vision, the kind that does not need to be validated, is stable enough to hold what is coming." Collier documented that the silence is the mechanism's most precise instrument because it strips away every false reason a man has for holding his vision. Fear of what happens if he stops. Hope that something will confirm he is right. Pride in not being someone who gives up. All of those reasons, useful as they might seem, are not sufficient foundations for what the mechanism is building. The silence removes them one by one, until what remains is the only reason strong enough to carry the vision to completion. The simple, quiet certainty that this is the right direction. Not because anything confirmed it, not because the path is clear, because the man who holds the vision knows, without evidence, without confirmation, without the comfort of signs, that he is going the right way. That knowing, stripped of everything else, is what the silence was waiting to find. And when it finds it, the silence ends. If you are in one of these stages right now, leave the number below, just the number, 1 through 5. I want to know where this is reaching people. Stage 6, the test of purpose. This stage arrives as a crisis of meaning. Not a crisis of circumstance, a crisis of direction. Everything you thought you were building towards suddenly feels uncertain. The calling you were following feels like it might have been wrong. The relationships you were investing in feel like they might have been mistakes. And Collier wrote that this crisis of purpose is the mechanism's way of doing the deepest possible clearing. Because purpose that cannot survive questioning is not purpose, it is preference. And what you are being asked to build requires actual purpose. The crisis is not the universe telling you that you were wrong. It is the mechanism removing every reason you had that was not strong enough to sustain what is coming. When the crisis of purpose passes, and Collier documented that it always passes for those who do not abandon the process, what remains is not preference. What remains is the unquestionable core of what you are actually here to do. And from that core, the building accelerates. Stage 7, the test of surrender. This is the final stage, and it is the most counterintuitive. Because in stage 7, the action required is to stop trying to make it happen, not to give up, not to abandon the vision, to release the grip on the how. Collier wrote, "The man who reaches this stage and learns to say, 'I know where I am going, and I trust the process of getting there,' has completed his preparation, because the mechanism cannot fully deliver to a man who is still trying to engineer the delivery. The delivery has its own route, its own timing, its own sequence of events that the conscious mind could never have planned, but the deeper mechanism has already organized. Surrender is not weakness, it is the recognition that the mechanism you set in motion is more capable of completing the delivery than your conscious management of it. And when you surrender the how, while holding the what, the final stage of apparent reversal ends, and the turn begins. If this channel is showing you things about the mind that nobody else is covering, subscribe. Every few days we go deeper into what these men documented 100 years ago. The principles that were removed, the things that never made it into the books you already know. Subscribe. What comes next is the part most people never hear. Now, here is what Collier documented as the signs that you are successfully moving through the period of apparent reversal, not the signs that it is ending, the signs that you are moving through it correctly. Sign 1. You feel a strange calm underneath the external chaos. Not happiness, not certainty that everything will be fine. A specific quality of calm that exists beneath the surface disruption, like the stillness at the bottom of a lake during a storm on its surface. Collier wrote that this calm is not the absence of awareness. It is the presence of something deeper than the disruption. The part of you that holds the vision independent of what the external world is doing around it. Sign 2. Small things begin to appear that have no logical connection to what you asked for, but that feel connected. A conversation that leads nowhere obvious, but that shifts something internally. A book that appears when you were not looking for it. A person who says one sentence that confirms something you had almost stopped believing. Collier called these the advanced signals. Not the delivery, the advanced signals. The mechanism's way of communicating that the direction is correct, even while the delivery is still in motion. Sign 3. Your attachment to the specific form of what you asked for begins to loosen. Not your attachment to what you want, your attachment to the specific shape you imagined it would take. Collier documented that this loosening is one of the final stages of internal preparation, because what is coming is almost always larger than the specific form you imagined, and your attachment to the smaller form would prevent you from recognizing or receiving the larger one. When you begin to hold the vision with less grip on its specific form, you are close to the turn. Sign 4. The losses stop feeling like losses, not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, what you are releasing begins to feel like what it actually is, something that was taking up space that something else needs to occupy. And the grief, while real, begins to carry underneath it a quality of rightness, as if a part of you that is deeper than the grief already knows what the space is being cleared for. Collier wrote, when loss begins to feel like liberation, the period of apparent reversal is in its final stages. The man does not need to force this feeling. He does not need to pretend that loss is not painful. He only needs to notice when the quality of the pain begins to shift, when something underneath the grief begins to feel like opening rather than closing. That shift is the signal. The turn is near. In the 3rd edition of The Secret of the Ages, the one most editions removed, a man named William Haskell. He had spent 4 years building a business that he believed in completely. 4 years of consistent effort, 4 years of holding the mental image of what that business would become. And in the 4th year, everything collapsed simultaneously. His primary investor withdrew. His key partner departed. 3 months of completed work was rendered unusable by a circumstance no one could have predicted, and he sat in his office one evening and wrote a letter to Collier. He wrote, I have done everything you documented. I have held the image. I have worked from assumption rather than hope. I have refused to interpret obstacles as failures, and I am watching everything I built dissolve in front of me. Tell me honestly, is the mechanism real, or have I been deceiving myself? Collier's reply, which Haskell preserved and later shared, contained one sentence that Haskell said changed everything. Collier wrote, what you are describing is not the mechanism failing. It is the mechanism completing the final stage of preparation for a delivery that your 4-year version of the business was not large enough to receive. The dissolution is not the end. It is the clearing of a vessel that was too small for what is coming. Hold the image, not of what you had, of what you actually want. 3 months later, a partnership appeared that restructured the entire business at a scale Haskell had never imagined possible. The investor who had withdrawn returned with 2 additional investors. The work that had been rendered unusable became the foundation of a completely redesigned approach that proved more effective than the original. What appeared to be collapse was clearing. What appeared to be loss was preparation. What appeared to be the end was the final stage before the turn. Collier documented Haskell's case alongside 11 others in a chapter he called The Law of Apparent Reversal. Each case followed the same pattern. Each person had reached the moment of apparent total failure. Each person had either held on or abandoned the process at that moment. Those who held on described the turn as arriving with a speed and completeness that seemed impossible given how total the collapse had appeared. Those who abandoned the process at that moment, and Collier documented their outcomes too, described spending years rebuilding to the point they had been at just before they walked away. One step from the turn, and they walked away. Collier wrote, "The cruelest thing about apparent reversal is that it is indistinguishable from actual failure, except for one thing. The man who is in apparent reversal still has his vision intact. The man who has actually failed has abandoned it. As long as you can still see where you are going, you are not failing. You are being prepared." Robert Collier documented 11 cases in the chapter on apparent reversal. What I have shown you tonight is the framework, the specific mental postures, the precise internal moves that determine how quickly you pass through each stage and how complete the turn is. Those are in the original. Not summarized, not interpreted. Collier's exact words, 7 volumes. The chapter most editions removed. The link in the description. Free. If you are in the period of apparent reversal right now, that chapter was written for you. Specifically, by a man who had watched too many people abandon the process one step before it delivered. He wrote it so that you would not. The link is below. Go there tonight. If you are in the period of apparent reversal right now, something important. The collapse is not evidence that you were wrong. The silence is not evidence that you have been forgotten. The loss is not evidence that what you want is not available to you. Every one of those appearances is the mechanism doing exactly what it is designed to do. Clearing the old, preparing the new, testing the permanence of your direction. And somewhere in the stages you are passing through, patience, clarity, solitude, loss, faith, purpose, surrender. There is a specific stage that is completing right now. You are not at the beginning of it. You are somewhere in the middle of it. And the middle always feels like the end to the person who is inside it. But the pattern Collier documented in case after case after case, the pattern that he eventually called law, because he had seen it too many times to call it anything else, is that the turn comes. Always, for those who do not abandon their vision before it arrives. Robert Collier wrote this in 1926, about you, about this moment, about the thing that is falling apart, that you cannot yet see is making space for what is coming. He knew you would be here. He knew most people would be one step away from the turn when they considered walking away. He wrote 7 volumes so that you would understand what you are actually looking at. The clearing, not the end. The preparation, not the failure. The final stage before the turn, not the collapse. What is falling apart is not your future. It is the old version of you that was too small to receive it. Let it go. The turn is closer than it appears. It always is.